Hey guys, welcome to today's video. Today I wanted to touch on a topic that I thought would be helpful for those of you who are either just starting out with watercolor or maybe even struggling a little bit to get started. That topic is water control. In my personal opinion, I feel like water control is one of the more important skills to have. So I thought that maybe I could create a video to help share some of the things that I have learned on my journey learning how to paint with watercolors, and I thought maybe they would be helpful for you too. This is definitely a learned skill, so take your time with trying to figure this out, but hopefully this video will help guide you and give you just a little bit of information to help you along the way. Okay, so the first thing I want to touch on when talking about controlling your water is that there are different variables. So, one of the things that's going to make a difference and that you want to be aware of is the type of brush that you're using. So, I have three brushes here. I use these pretty often. I have the silver black velvet, and I have a Princeton Heritage, and then I also have a Princeton Neptune quill brush. So this quill brush, I'll start with this because this holds a ton of water. I actually just got this, so I'm still getting used to using it, but these bristles are super soft and they hold a lot of water. So this is really good when I'm trying to paint big spaces, which was why I got it in the first place. But yeah, so this one definitely holds a lot of water. These next two here, I have the silver black velvet brush, which is a mix of squirrel and black synthetic filament. So this one is pretty soft as well. And because it is partially made of real squirrel, it does hold quite a bit of water. It holds it very nicely. They're very soft, and as you can see, I can move these around, but they do hold their shape pretty nicely. Anyway, not a brush review, but just saying that this holds water really nicely. And when I then purchased these Princeton Heritage brushes, I got a little set. And this one is made of synthetic sable, so it did hold the water pretty differently than this one. I noticed I had to soak it up a little bit more because it is synthetic, so it didn't hold on to it like this one did. So it definitely took me a little adjusting. Actually, when I first got these, I tried them out and then I didn't use them for a little while just because I was so used to this one. So depending on what brushes you're using, you may just want to keep that in mind that learning. I'm sorry, my dog is she's snoring. You may want to just keep that in mind that depending on the type of brush you're using will affect how you are able to use the water and stuff like that. So one variable there. The other thing I wanted to touch on was paper. So whether you're using hot press paper, cold press paper, whether it be from Canson or Arches, they are all going to absorb the water differently. So that is another thing that is going to make a difference. Not that one way is better than the other or one type is better than the other, just depending on how you paint and what you like and what you're comfortable with. So if you know that you buy Canson paper, this here is a piece of Canson mixed media paper that I'm going to be using today. But if you know that this is what you're going to be using, then make sure you practice on here and use that. And then if you wanted to try out another type of paper, definitely give a test run before you start painting your masterpiece because it may absorb the water slightly differently. So just some things to keep in mind when you are practicing. My sleepy puppy. Okay, so I'm going to start off by just creating a few different swatches here for you guys, showing you what the watercolor will look like on the paper depending on how much paint to water ratio that you use. So this first swatch here, I tried to get a even amount of about paint and water on my brush. As you can see, I get a nice even blend of color. There is not too much additional water going on here, and when this dries it will be a nice solid color. On the second swatch here, you can see I have added quite a bit more water to my brush and a little bit less pigment. Doing this, you can see the extra water that I have here and how it holds on to a little bit of the pigment. What I'm doing is just using my brush, and I can then direct that extra pigment into a certain area, and then as that dries it will blend out quite nicely. So for the sake of this video, I decided to move it all into this corner here, so it will dry with a little bit more color in that specific area and be more transparent in the other areas. I'm now going to wipe off the extra water that was in my brush and going to just pick up some additional pigment from the paint that was already wet that I've been using. So there is a minimal amount of water now in my brush and a lot more pigment. You can see that this does not spread as smoothly as the other two swatches, and the edges here are looking a little rough. But this is giving a nice dark, really opaque color. So if you are trying to paint a more detailed area on top of an area that may already have been painted, you may want to try using a little less water in your brush and a little bit more paint. Okay, so here are 3 examples of different amounts of water being used and added to your colors. So this one had a lot more water than it did paint. And as you can see, it came out really nice and light, transparent. And then I was able to push some of the pigment into one specific area, and you can see it blended out really, really nicely. So having too much water is, well, having too much water is not a good thing, but having more water than pigment is not necessarily a bad thing. I think it actually looks really, really nice, and I love the way it blends. So just remember that you can push and pull the pigment and kind of create these darker areas. This one here had a pretty even mix of water to paint ratio, and again it gave us this nice solid smooth color, no real variations, but again it was a nice clean mix of color. And then this one here was more paint than water, so this one was a little bit harder to move around and to spread, but it is really deep and rich and a lot less transparent than the other two. So just depending on what you are looking for in your painting, neither one is right or wrong. It really just depends on what you are looking for. And again, making little swatches like this is a great way to practice and get used to it, or a little practice painting, and you can try out even all 3 and see what you like and what is good for your style of painting. Okay, so now I'm going to give you an example of something you can do if you, say, accidentally use too much water. So I'm going to fill up my brush intentionally with too much water. I'm using my silver black velvet because I know that this brush holds water a little bit more than my heritage brushes. So I'm painting this out, and oh my goodness, look at that. There's way too much water. One way to help with that is you can dry off your brush as much as possible, clean it out, and dry it off as best you can. And then you can actually use your brush to soak up some of this water. Right, so now I've soaked it up. I'm going to clean it again, and I'm going to dry it off again as much as I can. And now I have this empty space here, so I can redirect some of this pigment into here and I have now removed all of that extra water. So again, this is a very light wash because we use so much water, but I can redirect some of the pigments and I can balance this out by pulling water here. And I want it to stay on the bottom and keep that nice and light. So that's one thing that you can do to help remove some extra water. If I didn't like how this came out, it wasn't exactly what I was going for, I could then go over it and it won't be super wet like before. I can just add some more pigment and really fill this in. I am going to stop there. So as you can see, I am pulling the pigment to where I want it to go, and I just want it to blend out to these edges. So I am pulling it. This is controlling your water. I have this little bubble here. I'm going to scooch him back up there because he's kind of dark. So moving him around, controlling where he goes, dabbing it in, and it'll be darker up there and it'll fade out nice down here. Another thing you can do if you have, again, too much water, I'm filling up my brush, getting a little bit of paint, and too much water, it's running all over again. I'm not liking that. So what you can do is drop the brush real quick, pull a piece of your paper towel, and just soak it up. Soaking up the water, all that extra. Now I'm going to wipe off my brush because I just learned that there is too much water on there. And now I'm going to come back in, and again, I'm going to control it and spread it around to where I want the colors to go. And if I don't like it, I can go over it again with a little bit more pigment, and it's okay because I haven't oversaturated my paper. So those are two ways to help you to get rid of any extra water if you've accidentally gone too far. I'm going to create this swatch here, and then I'm going to add a little bit more water to it, just to kind of show you what it looks like when you have too much water. Again, my puppy is snoring. I'm sorry. Okay, let me fill my brush with some water, and then I'm going to add it in here. And you can see it's kind of spreading the paints and going to leave these really weird lines within it. I'll show you again once it dries, but you really don't want, I mean, maybe you do, but these weird lines. So when there's too much water like that, you may want to use one of the methods I just mentioned and pull out some of that water. And another thing that can happen if you have too much water like this is that your paper can buckle and start to warp. So if there is too much water, your painting probably is going to be a little warped when you are finished. So you want to try not to use this much water. Understood, maybe you're going for this sort of effect, but just keep that in mind that that will happen to your paper. You can use a block of paper where the edges are glued down. That does help with the buckling of the paper, but all in all, too much water will affect your paper. It'll start to wear it down and it will buckle, and you want to try to avoid that as much as possible. Okay, so I'm now going to create just a quick practice painting to try and demonstrate the things we just talked about with the amount of water being used on the brush versus the amount of paint or pigment. This first step here, you can see I am using a lot more water to pigment ratio, and I am trying to work a bit quickly here to spread this out and get it to where I want it to go. And I'm now swapping out colors and just waiting for them to dry and blend nicely into each other. But there is a bit more water being used in this first step here, and this is going to just be my base layer, and I want it to be nice and light and simple and just kind of lay the groundwork for the rest of the painting. I'm now going to add a wing here for my bird, and what I wanted to demonstrate was a more equal amount of water to paint and get that nice solid color going on, but as you can see I did accidentally use a little bit too much water, so I do reach back and dry off my brush and try to push and move that around because I used a little bit more water than I had intended to. So again, just trying to figure this out. This is a practice painting. This is why it is helpful to work with your brushes and your paper and understand how they work together. So it happens. Sometimes I still don't get it right, but there are ways to fix and adjust it. So what I did was, like I said, I just dried off my brush a little bit and was able to then soak up some of that additional water and move the paint to where I wanted it to go. I'm now coming in with a smaller brush and using less water and more paint, and I want to create this nice dark area for my bird's eye, and I am going over other colors, so I want to make sure that this is nice and dark and that I have less water going on. So what I'm also going to do is draw the outline of the beak, and I am using again the same small brush, a little bit less water because I want this to be darker and more detailed and to stand out a little bit. Here I am just using water to kind of blend out some of the color that I had used at the end of the beak. I'm not sure I would consider this as part of a water control lesson, but it is the technique that I am using here, so I just wanted to mention it for you guys. again, on this wing, I wanted to use less water, more paint in my brush, and just kind of create a few little detailed lines just to give the effect of the feathers, but I used a little too much water again. I don't know what was going on with me here, but so what I had done was just blended it out, and I'm going to let it dry and then try again. So here's our little practice bird all finished. I tried not to add too many details to keep this a little bit shorter, but also did try to convey some of the different ways of using water to paint and how to move the paint around on your paper using your water. So hopefully you were able to see some of those techniques being used here, and I hope that this was helpful. Okay, you guys, that is it for today's video. I hope you found this to be helpful, a little bit informative, and maybe help you problem solve if you are struggling with water control. Again, this is a practiced skill, so it really just comes down to the materials you're using and you just practicing and trying different things and not being afraid of making mistakes and trying to learn how to fix them. I am a self-taught artist, so most of what I know how to do is just by making mistakes and doing. So I think that is the best way to learn how to make art. But either way, I hope that this was a little bit helpful for you. If you want to see more informative videos like this in the future, let me know what you may have questions on, and I will do my best to answer them for you and try to help you along if I can. Again, I hope this was helpful, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!